Welcome to Mind Controllers, a podcast about shining the light on the psychological aspects behind some of our favorite video games. I'm your host today, Joe Moreno, joined by my co-host,
Brandon Croft.
And we'll be talking about Persona 3 Reload and its DLC.
I actually didn't play this, but I mean, we're both pretty big fans of Persona.
Yeah.
I would argue that are the bigger fan than
I am
me.
the Atlas fanboy. I am the one that's buying collector's editions knowing it's a bad idea.
Dude.
And I'm still going to be paying for the DLC after I buy the collector's edition. But
I'm so jelly of that Metaphor collector's edition.
It's so nice.
Yeah.
It got delayed and I got it yesterday.
Okay. So by a day, right?
By a day. It wasn't too bad. I don't know if it was because I ordered protein powder off of Amazon Prime Day that pushed it back. And they combined the packages. It came in the same box, right? It got pushed back till Saturday, but I didn't even get to play it because I was still playing through Echoes of Wisdom. Anyways,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I just got through Echoes of Wisdom as well. We'll talk more about it later. I mean, this isn't a spoiler pod for Echoes, but maybe we'll do one eventually. But yeah, I know I've heard you talk about Persona 3 Reload and the DLC. We've talked about it a bit in Scatterbrained as well. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious to see like what came up with here. I saw talks about the Silent Protagonist. And I know I won't spoil anything, so
yeah, it's all good.
I'll save it for the discussion. But I am curious to know how long it took you to beat both the DLC or the main game and the DLC.
143 hours.
Holy shit! Yeah. Wow, 143.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. How many months would you say that was?
I think I started playing Persona 3 this April, so April 2024. I got through it in about a month and a half, maybe 2 months.
Oh, okay.
It took longer because I had a trip to Texas. So that kind of pushed back my progress, which is all good. I love going out there to see my friends. But yeah, I finished it in about 2 months. The DLC dropped in September, and I think I finished that in less than a month.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's like 25 hours. So it's like 2 weekends. Almost 3 weekends,
That would be like a full month for me, but yeah.
I had the time for it because weekends I just like after like just work is so tiring. So I'm like, you know what? Let me make Friday night and Saturday. Like if I'm not doing anything, it's gonna be gaming time.
Just doing gaming.
Yeah.
Nice. Well, shoot, I guess we might as well just dive right into it then.
Let's do it.
You can tell us all about it. Before we do that, though, we always got to give our spoiler warning. So we're going to be talking about Persona 3 Reload and its DLC, and maybe anything related to any of the Persona games. I've only ever played Persona 5, so that will, and I know you've played more than that. So we might, 1 and 2.
Yeah.
And, like all of our discussions, these characters are fictional. So they have no intended resemblance to any real person or thing. At least not coming from our end. I don't know what the developers have in mind.
We are not Persona protagonists.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know anyone who is.
Definitely not. We don't have plot armor. But we're also not licensed therapists. So we don't have any authority to make any official diagnoses or anything. But Joe is an associate therapist. A rather good one at that. And he has experience with patients. So for the most part, these are just 2 informal discussions. Yeah, I guess we'll start us off. Tell us about Persona 3.
All right, let's get into it, right?
Let's just dive in. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, so what I want to focus on is the silent protagonist and kind of make like a persuasive kind of essay in a way of,
we haven't had a persuasive essay yet.
I like the silent protagonist. I know it gets a lot of like, just not great press or like people are like, I'm not feeling it,
Right.
But I like it. I like it a lot. So this is going to focus on Persona 3 and we'll just get into it. So Persona 3 follows a group of high school students trying to cope with the understanding and accepting of death in a world surrounded by it, as well as finding their own reasons for living. So Persona 3 is a turn-based role-playing game mixed with visual novel, social simulator gameplay, and dungeon crawling. Location is Tatsumi Port Island, also known as Port Island, and this location was the site of a secret experiment that changed the atmosphere of the surrounding area of Iwatodai City. We learned that shadows were kept in secret and have impacted the island, which leads us to the goal of the game. The party and the goal of the game is we're going to be exploring a dungeon. Do you remember Persona 5's Mementos?
Yeah.
So this is the opposite. We're going up instead of down.
Okay.
It was before Persona 5, right? So it's this giant tower, about 200 something floors. So people get tired of it because it's monotonous, right? It's a lot of the same environments, but I don't mind it. So at night, the world is plagued by something called the dark hour, which is an hour that exists between 12 a.m. and 1 a.m. It's considered the 25th hour of the day. These are where the shadows are. This is where the games and enemies appear. And this is where Tartarus appears. And Tartarus is actually the location of the school you go to during the day.
Oh,
so there's an interesting plot point where like if someone gets stuck in the school and they're there at night, they get stuck in the tower itself.
Ooh.
Right, and they only exist in the tower for that 1 hour, and then they like kind of just disappear.
That's kind of wild.
Yeah, and there's a plot point with that with one of the characters, which we won't get into, but Persona 3's got some interesting ideas. So like I said, the goal of the game is to get rid of the shadows, the dark hour, because you know what's going on, and each time the dark hour I guess like happens, people turn into like these coffins. I don't know if you've seen any promotional material.
Probably,
right? So
point,
if they don't have personas, they turn into like these little coffins and nothing happens to them, right? But if you're caught like in the dark hour and you're like, you know, sentient, right, and you don't have a persona, the shadows will get you, so they'll kill you.
Oh, damn.
So, yeah.
So they have to, I mean, I'm assuming the people who got caught had personas, but if maybe there's some people who didn't, who got killed.
Yeah, I don't know. You see that happen in the game. So there's this like mercenary group that what they'll do is they'll assassinate during the dark hour. And so they'll find their victims, let the shadows take care of them, or they'll take care of them themselves.
Dang.
This is a dark game. This game I used to call it like Depression Simulator.
Yeah,
2010.
I can see why.
Yeah, it's got some very dark themes to it.
A lot of death.
Tons of it. A lot of it. So each month we are tasked to complete beating the boss at the end of the month. So each full moon there's not a final boss, but just a boss that we have to make it through. So what you're doing is each month you're trying to make it to the point of the tower where it's cut off. There's a checkpoint, right? And it's like, you know, that's where you stop for the month. And then you get to fight the final boss. And you just progress that way until the end of the game. So just like any Persona game, we're going to be focusing on forming bonds, social links, instead of confidants, it's just social links. You know, focusing on these bonds allows the player to fuse stronger personas and advance their skills. The gameplay is similar to Persona 5. If, you know, it sounds familiar. Yeah, it's Persona. This is what Persona 5 was based off of. It's Persona 3, right? And kind of like the foundational aspects they allowed to, you know, flourish into 5. So Persona 3 was the first of its kind from what I remember, and the Atlas team continues to further and innovate. I mean, look at Metaphor. We won't get into it in this one, right?
Yeah, but that's going to probably be next episode.
Yeah, I can't wait for that one.
Yeah, me too. I feel like we're both going to be talking on that one.
For sure.
Yeah, no pressure.
All right, so let's get to the silent protagonist. So our silent protagonist is, his name is Makoto Yuki. He's got dark blue hair, unkempt at the front with bangs covering his right eye, blue eyes, and light build, being of average height. He's often showed with his hands in his pockets, except when he's holding a weapon during, you know, the dark hour. Even when running, he just has his hands in his pocket. He's like this cool guy, kind of like doesn't care. So he's got this like mysterious air. He's aloof, frequently on like listening to music on his earpods or earphones. And Shigenori Sojima designed Makoto first and formed designs from other characters around him. He maintains an air of neutrality, keeping with the tradition Megami Tensei franchise of the protagonist being typical yet a hero, which that's why he's got like that air of coolness. Like, oh yeah, he's a pretty cool guy. I mean, you've seen him, right? What he looks like.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, so I like that design. It's really cool. Right. And again, he's the silent protagonist, aside from technically speaking in battle in certain instances. He's very stoic, reserved, and calm, gathered by the fact that he's faced death and his own mortality. He remains unmoved even when the guns are pointed at him. So there's like a scene where someone, you know, like there's this guy, we call him Gun Jesus, right? Because he looks like, looks like Jesus, right? He's got a gun. And he just pointed at him and he's just unfazed. He's just like, whatever, dude, I don't care.
Whatever.
Yeah. So, you know, because he's faced death before.
So cool.
Yeah, right. I was like, damn, all right. So nothing really phases him. But here's the thing. Throughout the game, like he starts to open up, right? He starts to care about people. And even in the movies, I do recommend, because they're like an hour and a half. I think there are 4 movies. You can, yeah.
What?
I mean, compared to 100 hours of RPG, right?
Yeah. Wait, are those movies found in the game, or is it just...
No. You have to find them on your own. Yeah.
Okay.
Or you can buy the Blu-ray, which is like $150 for each, maybe. It's wild.
I'll find it somewhere.
Yeah. I recommend those if you don't have the 100 hours for Persona 3.
Yeah.
But you get to see to open up, you know, he's introverted, distant, aloof, but then he becomes like open and caring, actually cares about his party members, and you start to see like his personality come out. I don't know, it's really like great change to witness.
Yeah.
So many of his personality traits and reactions to certain situations are ultimately based on the player's actions and decisions, right? This is the silent protagonist. We're going to, you know, you'll get options of what to say, how to act, right? The primary choice has him being enthusiastic, upbeat, and kind, engaging as many social links as he can. each one rewarding him with stronger powers. Likewise, the player can make him pessimistic, morbid, and lonely, barely engaging in social links. In normal conversation, the protagonist's dialogue choices can range from attentive to unobservant. So it's up to you, right? How are you going to play this character?
Yeah.
How are you going to portray and maybe project as well, right? You can be that guy that's like, I'm here for my friends, going to help them out. Or you can be the guy that's a loner, right? Which that's a way to play the game too. You don't have to engage in the social links.
Yeah. You could just select whatever. I mean, like, not really care about it. And the social links. I guess you don't. Those are just like little mini side stories that you can engage with, like some of the side party members and whatnot. And with those, I guess you could choose to ignore them. I'd feel terrible, but
yeah, for sure. Choice. Because that's how you also get stronger powers. That's how you level up your personas. When you fuse them, they get an extra EXP bonus. You don't get that if you don't engage in bonds and talking to people. Also, like with Persona 3, this was the first time they implemented this system, the social link system. So some of the social links aren't that great. They're kind of basic, right? I mean, it's Persona 3, right? Compared to 5. But they're still pretty important to do, and it gives you a different perspective on a character. One that I like, which I forget his name, but there's this character that he's dying. He's got this illness, right? This like that doctors can't cure, right? And at the end of the social link, you learn that he lived out his dream, which was writing like a children's book, right? And you helped him do that.
Right? That's nice.
And I don't know if people are into mysticism, whoever is, religion and whatever, but at the end of the social link, you're talking to the guy's spirit because he's already gone.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so...
That's sad.
It is sad. Oh, no. It is sad. But it also teases you, like, you got to live your life and kind of no regrets, right? Go for it.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of stuff that you see in these games where you're like, oh, shit. These games can be deep. I know I see a lot of, like, I guess, like, hate for Atlas. Like, oh, they're always up their own ass with their stories and they're so serious and stuff. But it's like, if you allow yourself to become part of the world and kind of just live it and play it, I mean, there's some like beautiful messages in these games.
Yeah. I feel like Atlas, or at least the Persona series and the games that I've played of the Persona realm so far, they do a great job at kind of capturing this like real life human emotions and interactions and problems or dilemmas or conflicts that feel real. So it almost makes you like have to face them yourself. And it's really easy to empathize with a lot of the characters in there. Yeah, I think they do a great job at capturing humanity in general.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And so with the silent protagonist, he's under our control. They don't speak, like I mentioned. They're usually unable to express their thoughts or characteristics compared to like maybe a Nathan Drake, right, from Uncharted. Right? We as the player can determine tone of voice, expressions, since this will be the focus of the Persona series. Makoto Yuki comes to mind as the silent protagonist for me, because, I mean, like Cloud, he can be the silent protagonist, but we kind of know his, personality, and he does open up, as we play Final Fantasy. There are many silent protagonists that I'm sure, like, and everyone else knows, like Link. Right? Link is classic. Legend of Zelda, right? Red from the Pokemon series.
Oh, yeah.
The Courier from Fallout New Vegas. The Chosen Undead in Dark Souls. These are characters that are utilized as a vehicle for the player to identify with the character and make choices that appeal to the player, which is acted out in game. They are the blank slate, right? They're the ones that we are essentially, we're like the artist.
Tabula rasa.
Yeah. Right? So I got some research information. We are an educational podcast at times, right? So
once a month.
Once a month, yeah. According to Christie, 2016, silence affords the player a sense of presence, which can be described as a psychological state in which virtual objects are experienced as actual objects. They feel like they are able to interact with the people and objects found in the game. So essentially, we become part of that world, right? We become that silent protagonist. We're engaging, we're picking the choices. Are we going to go to the dungeon today? Are we going to focus on social links? Are we going to focus on our own stats, right? Intelligence, courage, all that stuff, right? We, as the player, are allowed to make those choices. So we are, essentially controlling this protagonist. It can be said that silent protagonists offer more an immersion, allowing us the players to fill in the blanks. A benefit to the silent protagonist narrative device is to allow players to experience the story and develop their own interpretations of the story. For example, in Persona 3, there are multiple instances of death, and the game will display messages of how death impacts the party. However, the silent protagonist does not display the grief and sadness, which allows the player to do so. Some anecdotal evidence is there's the death of a certain party member. This is the character that's like you gain halfway through the game. He's super strong. His strength stats are like through the roof. If you decide to level him up and spend time with him, you get to learn more about him and maybe like him as a character. So he's like this stoic, tall guy, right? He doesn't want to like deal with anything, but you get to learn like he loves cooking. He loves, caring for his friends. He loves the dog because you have like a dog party member as well in Persona 3.
Oh, nice.
Koromaru, which I love that dog, dude.
Yeah.
He's so cute.
Instead of Morgan?
Yeah.
Morgana.
Morgana, yeah. Which my team was Makoto, because you can't take him off the team, right?
Sure.
Was Koromaru. I had Aigis, which is another protagonist, which we'll get to in the DLC. Okay. And then, of course, the healer, Yukari, because I need a healer. I don't want to be the healer. I just want to do the damage,
Yeah.
But anyways, back to this character. He's super strong. He's a kind guy. However, later in the game, he is killed. And I, as a player, the first time I played Persona 3, this astonished me. And it made me angry because I actually spent time like leveling this guy up. I was like, this guy's so cool. He's super strong. I like the magic system in these games, but this guy doesn't really have that. He's got like more physical skills. And I was like, but he does a lot of damage. And you can set him up to do more crits. And I was like, holy crap, this is really sick. However, you do end up losing him.
That's crazy. And I'm sure there's no... You probably get back like the equipment or whatever he had on, but other than that...
You don't get the time, you don't get the experience points, right? But that's life, right? In a way. And that's why this game is so deep, man. It's like, shit, yeah. I mean, you can level up to level 99 if you want to. He's still,
no
fated
matter
to
what
die.
In the story, there's nothing you can do to save him.
Yeah.
Wow. That's a bold choice, and one that I kind of applaud Atlas for doing in the game development, to just kill off like not like a main character, but I guess kind of in a way a main character. I would say all the party members in that game are like main characters.
I would say so too. And this is a shout out to, I don't know if my friend Sam listens to this, but I had him actually spec into this character as well. I was like, dude, you should try him. He's super strong.
Oh.
Because I wanted him to feel the pain I felt.
Oh my God, you gaslit him.
I was like, dude, this guy's awesome. Right? Because I needed someone to understand what I was like dealing with, right? I was like, dude. And
then what was his reaction?
He was like the same, like, what the why would you do that? Like, I was like, I needed you to feel what I felt in this moment.
How dare you? Wow. Okay, now I know. I need to be warned of like any advice that you give me in the Persona game, or Metaphor in this case, but shit.
I haven't touched it, so I don't know. But, well, besides the demo, right? Besides the 10 hours I put into the demo, 19 maybe, I don't know.
I want to talk to you so much about Metaphor right now, but yeah, we'll save it. We'll save it.
But as the protagonist, like, he doesn't really show these emotions when you lose his character, right? There's a point where there's a dialogue choice where there's students, because this guy, the guy that dies, he was kind of a delinquent, right? And there's a scene where some of the students that you don't really know, they're NPCs, are like, oh, who cares? He's just a thug. And you as the player can pick an option that says like, shut the hell up. Like, you don't know anything. Or you can just keep quiet and just whatever, right? Just be aloof. So this is the silent protagonist. This is where we inform ourselves with the knowledge we have in the world, of the game world, in our own world as well. And we live out that, those choices through these characters.
Wow.
So Don Carson, 2000, states that allowing the player to explore an environment provides them with an affordance that comes with feeling like they are part of the experience rather than a passive viewer. So the story elements are infused with the physical space as a player explores. So even going back to that scene where they're talking crap about my boy, you're just like, you become part of that because you can take it personally. Like, dude, you didn't know him, right? And these are just code. This is just code. These characters don't exist, but you feel attached to them. Right?
Yeah.
You spend time with these characters and you end up caring for them.
I mean, they were written by someone, a human. They were brought to life by another human doing the voice acting. And like I said earlier, it's supposed to capture like aspects of humanity. So I think it makes a lot of sense for you to start kind of getting attached to them, falling in love with them, feeling grieved and sad when they die, when you lose them. They're code, but they got some humanity behind them as well.
They do. You're right, yeah. So according to Bayless 2007, in the early days of digital games, game characters were little more than generic figures that lacked both personality and depth in their design. As players played through the game, focusing on ludic goals rather than taking an interest in the avatar itself. The avatar was simply used as a tool or puppet to complete the game. The avatar's role highlighted the player's own embodiment outside of the game world. So think about like old school Fallout, or like the first Fallout, or maybe even Wasteland. I don't know if you've heard of Wasteland. These are the games before Fallout, where you're just like a little dude, right?
Oh, okay.
It's an RPG system. but you're just a little guy, and you don't really, I don't think he has a name or a backstory or anything, but you're traveling through the wasteland, and there is an endpoint to it, right? So back then, like even think of Mario, right? Like the first Mario Bros. It's like, who is this guy? We don't know any backstory and stuff, right? We're just gonna save the princess.
We didn't get that big Mario lore until way later,
which we rarely get anyways, right? We still don't really know who Mario is. He's a plumber, or he was.
I know. Well, you got to watch the Super Mario Bros. Movie.
Is that
the
even
animated
canon,
one? Chris Pratt voiced it. Of course, it's canon.
It's canon for sure. But yeah, so these were those simple characters. So according to Westcott 2009 and Byrne 2004, recently designers used blank slate characters, and this is not recently, this was back in 2004, 2009, right?
Yeah.
They used blank slate characters to afford players the actor role with the game's narrative, essentially becoming the hero character. They quote, industry designers refer to the necessity of a player character as representing the kind of everyman to enable the player to fully and functionally inhabit their game, which makes sense, especially in Persona 3, because when you start with your social stats, you're kind of just, I don't know how to say it in a nice way, but you're kind of just a dumbass, right? You're kind of just like, there's nothing going on. You know, you have no courage, no intelligence. You're just like, whatever. I think even below average at that point.
You did not spec into intelligence and charisma.
No, you did not. But you get a chance to build that up, right? And then you become like a Giga Chad. And at that point, it's like, my God. All right, okay, well, that's not happening.
Giga Chad, Persona protagonist.
But Byrne 2004 goes on to state that the Everman tale is told like a traditional hero story, formulaic in nature that provides a type of protagonist ideally suited to be constructed by rules and formulae being already predictable in his behavior. A popular example of this is Link from The Legend of Zelda. He's typically the blank slate character whose personality is left open. He's got to save a princess, and that's the typical goal. Yet this method results in the game character with eternal personalities that are intentionally left upon and loosely defined. So, I mean, when you think of Link, what do you think?
Yeah, just a silent protagonist type person. Strong, very stoic, right. Stops at nothing, but also shows almost no emotion. There may be one or two cutscenes throughout a whole Zelda game in which he'll be astonished, and then that's it. And then he just immediately overcomes whatever it was.
Right. No, I agree with you. Yeah. And sometimes this is beneficial. A blank slate can, approach and ignore some opportunities that emerge with complex characters in a way of like, how Legend of Zelda is going to end, right? There's not going to be any drama into it. So it's simple, right? Yeah. And sometimes simplicity is best, right? Because, the goal is to save Zelda, or the goal is to save Hyrule.
Right.
And that's okay. It doesn't have to be a whole narrative. It doesn't have to be a whole 6-part movie or whatever. It doesn't have
to be an Atlas game.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be an Atlas game, though. I do love those Atlas games. But according to research, there are projective characters and expressive characters. So what is the projective character? These are the little to no characteristic characters. Have like no history or, like a little bit of history. Predefined personal relationships allowing the player to project or embody themselves onto, an in-game entity. Projected characters are designed to afford presence and immersion within the game's case. So Makoto Yuki from Persona 3. While as expressive characters are defined with personality, history, and characteristics that must be communicated to the player. Expressive characters are designed to be the protagonist in their story, designed to afford presence and immersion within the game space, often used for games with high levels of actions, like Nathan Drake, right? I'm wondering how Metaphor is going to handle this. I know we keep coming back to it, but the protagonist actually speaks in Metaphor.
Yeah, and from what I've heard, personality. Yeah, has a personality, speaks a lot, and I think that kind of becomes maybe not a plot point, the fact that he speaks, but it certainly has more agency as a character.
Definitely.
I know that game still offers you some like narrative choices at times, but so far, usually when I see them, it's usually not to, actually that's not true, because I just unlocked like the tooltip yesterday to, if you select like the correct thing, then you get a little bonus.
Oh yes, a mag bonus.
Yeah. I hadn't ever encountered that yet until yesterday.
I think that was in the it is in the demo.
It's in the demo,
but you have to level up more to rank 2 his social bond.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I just hit rank 2 with more yesterday. We're getting
sidetracked, but back to Makoto Yuki
and
the player character as a performing object. So like I said, this is a little persuasive, right? So what can a projective character offer? I like the silent protagonist stuff. I like that blank slate. A projective character can offer engagement in different manners than an expressive character can. According to Westcott 2009, engagement in games is manifest through a player's representation of action in the game. The main mechanism for this engagement is through direct control of a player character. So you're going to be engaged as you're directly controlling this character.
Mm-hmm.
Digital gaming involves a screen, producing as a doubling in which actions on a controller are represented back on screen. Thus, the player is always the audience to his, her, or their own play and act. Individual progress through a given game, always watching the results of her actions, their actions, your actions, on a screen that shows an every changing theatrical performance built by code and run by numbers. So we as the player, we have the controller. It's in our hands, right? We're going to dictate, again, are we going to go hit the dungeon? Are we hanging out with friends, right? You know, and we see this feedback represented in front of you. And I think that's why gaming is so alluring, right? Is that we actually have like agency. We have power in a way, right? To control these characters and to live out day by day, right? Depending on the game, of course.
Yeah.
You know, so theorists have argued that the phenomenal and signified relationship between the player and their player character centers around themes as diverse as instrumental extension, identity play, right? Testing or experimenting with a possible self, assuming a safe environment as a prerequisite for such experimentation. Just trying out things, right? And I want to be the outgoing guy. I can do that in Persona 3. What does that look like, right? It gives you some context, right?
Yeah.
This kind of play can be ludic, which is spontaneous and playfulness. That's what ludic is. And dramatic, function, and some even postulate that our gaming bodies consist some form of postmodern virtual life.
Yeah. I mean, and yeah, it feels like that's what a lot of people are, well, a lot of like tech bros are like working towards with the metaverse type stuff.
So Westcott compares gaming as puppeteering. And I was like, okay, that's an interesting idea, but it makes sense because the player character acts out the movement of the player and marks their progression in game. Puppetry can be seen as the manipulation of inanimate figures by human hands in dramatic performance, which, yeah, I'm controlling Makoto Yugi, right? He's the one, you know, I'm telling him to go there, you know. Is he going to go hang out with Junpei, or is he going to go, you know, drink a bunch of energy drinks? You can do that. It's called Mad Bull instead of Red Bull.
Oh my God.
you can hit up the ramen shop. You can go get takoyaki. You can just do a bunch of random stuff. Right. And I'm the one controlling him in that way. So I am the puppeteer. So the silent protagonist can offer an investment with the player character with exaggerated signs of life that enable the player to suspend disbelief and identify with the protagonist as if a relationship were possible at the same time as knowing that the protagonist is merely a game figure. So this is this is important, right? You know, you're not the protagonist.
I'm not?
No, I'm sorry to tell you. And neither am I. But when we play these games, we can be the protagonist.
Okay.
Right.
I'll take that.
Yeah.
I'll settle for that.
You can take it with the 143 hours that I'm sure we'll find in Metaphor and every other Atlas game.
But I named the Metaphor main character after myself.
It's a metaphor. But anyways, so the consideration of this puppeteering, you know, we are in control of the puppet, frees us from a historical drive to realism and builds a densely codified and condensed expressive form. So it's escapism, right? We're escaping to a different world.
Yeah.
The player binds to the lived experience of gameplay through engagement with the sign systems at play in a specific gaming experience. This is a live and improvised dramatic performance in which the player consists of both puppet master through their input control as well as audience through their screen gaze. The player character is a particular type of virtual puppet, one that moves within a specific game world directed to a particular game objective achieved through our skillful progression over time. And that progression is skillful, let me tell you. Because when you're summoning Satan at the end of the game as your persona...
God, what?
Yeah.
Can you unlock that, or is that as some story thing that everybody does?
You can unlock that.
You could just...
It's like a special fusion. Satan. Yeah, you can just have Satan.
Okay.
I had him at level 99. He was maxed out magic, and he was just... You can actually have... Is it Hillel? And like Lucifer as well. So before he became Satan. So do you have like these... and
evolved,
also like the strongest persona you can unlock is called the Messiah.
Holy crap.
This is Persona 3. And that persona is actually special to Makoto Yugi. It's the Messiah.
Okay.
He is. Okay. He's emo Jesus. He saves everyone at the end of the game. But
I didn't know it was rooted this deeply in religion.
Yeah. Persona 3 goes hard with that. It really does. Because 4 and 5 move away from that. So I don't know if...
Like, I don't remember any sort of like religious figures or names popping up in Persona 5.
You do get like Persona 5, what is it, Satanael, which is like that final persona that you have with the giant gun.
Oh.
That Satan saves Christmas, essentially, because that's when the final boss... I don't know what's up with the Megami Tensei. I mean, they love like it's demonology and stuff, so that makes sense to me, right? SMT, so is the foundational stuff. This is like, you're going to be training demons, you're going to be collecting them. It's like demonic Pokemon, right?
Yeah.
That's what it is. So I can see how that influences Persona, because that's what you're using. Is this personas that, were enemies in that game.
True. Okay. Yeah.
But like I said, this is some skillful progression, because it takes some time to like build them up, right? Make sure they're perfect, to even unlock the skills to like fuse them. It takes time.
Yeah.
And this is all what you can do, right? You don't have to do this. You can just beat the game, whatever. But again, skillful progression.
And these are all examples for a JRPG, really, or like a specific kind of JRPG.
Yeah,
whereas,
It's like
their skillful progression in other games is completely different. I'm thinking of like Elden Ring, where that skill is like, it's an almost muscle tactical skill you develop in order to dodge and stuff like that and read the enemy.
Yeah, eventually you learn the pattern as well. Right? Yeah. So moving on to this article, Transportability and Presence as Predictors of Avatar Identification Within Narrative Video Games by Christie and Fox, 2016. Identification is the degree to which individuals like a character perceive characters as being similar to themselves or empathize with a character, and it's linked to both narrative enjoyment. In video games, at least one character is directly controlled by the user and may have been designed by the user to represent themselves within the game world. So this is like, like kind of MMOs, right? Where we design our own character.
Oh, yeah. Or any sort of character creation in a game.
So the ability to control these game characters may increase identification far beyond what is possible in traditional media, which I agree with that, right? I mean, like books, movies, they're great, right? But we are not embodying the characters, right? We're not the puppeteer, the master, right? This is because avatars may not only represent the self, but also idealized self that represent us as who we want to be, a wishful identification of the self.
I see. You're really projecting onto your main character sometimes.
Right. Yeah. Narrative involvement refers to the degree to which a message recipient is cognitively and effectively invested in a narrative. So one way of assessing narrative involvement is to look at the individual's likelihood of becoming involved in stories in general, a characteristic referred to as transportability. This is a measure of how involved the player feels with the game and its world and its characters. So past research, it is. I was like, oh, okay. I'm glad that there's this kind of research out there.
Yeah. It's like a video game human factors design research there.
So video games are not a waste of time.
No, not now.
But past research has shown that transportability is highly predictive of the degree to which an individual will become involved with any specific story, both on a story and character level. Presence has been defined in a variety of ways across the literature, but can be most broadly defined as a psychological state in which virtual objects are experienced as actual objects, either in sensory or non-sensory ways. Meaning that when a person experiences presence, they feel like they're able to interact with the people and the objects found there. So the alternate ending and true ending in Persona 3. But what I mean by this is there is a choice you can make at the end of the game where you can get an alternate ending, which is the bad ending, where you decide to kill a certain character because they're turning into the final boss. They're summoning the final boss.
Oh.
So he's like, hey, if you guys kill me, you can live out the rest of your 2 to 3 months, like not knowing that you guys are going to die. And you can live like regular teenagers, like have fun, right? You won't know you're going to die. Right. And so the party's up, like, should we do that? It's up to you as the protagonist to make that choice, of course. Right. Because knowing that you're going to die anyways, would you rather die in bliss, in ignorance, or would you rather, die, like live out your life knowing, hey, you're going to die?
Yeah.
How's that going to impact you? Grief, sadness, of course. Right. Yeah.
True. I even want to think about that right now.
This game is heavy.
Yeah.
And so you can get that alternate ending, which isn't the true ending. The true ending is you let this character that, who's summoning the final boss live, right? And he's like, I don't know why you would do that. You guys could live out your lives like ignorant, and kind of like blissfully, right? But, the true ending is like, no, we'll face it together, right? It's Persona, the bonds, power of friendship, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And you get the true ending, which I think I mentioned in a previous pod, but essentially the protagonist does sacrifice himself to save everyone. He's holding back Nyx, which is like the avatar of death. And Nyx is summoned not by this like character that's actually summoning, but the human desire of wanting to die and kind of just not deal with the world anymore.
Almost like an apathy, like death via apathy.
There's something called apathy syndrome within the game, which every month there are people that just don't care. Like they're on the streets, they just don't care. They're apathetic. And so
is that a mechanic at all? Like,
not really. It's just like a story narrative element. Yeah.
Once again, thinking about metaphor and the popularity and
nothing like that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But going back to the article, as we said, presence is that psychological state in which virtual objects are experienced as actual objects. These presence can be divided into 3 subtypes. self-presence, social presence, and physical presence. So self-presence is associated with the feelings of embodiment in the avatar. A player may feel like their avatar's limbs are their own. For example, is like, have you ever like get hit in the game? You're like, ow. I don't know if you've ever done that, right? Or you've seen people do that.
Kinda, yeah. Or like a jump scare during a horror game or something
Alan
like
Wake?
that.
Yeah.
Bro, Alan Wake with headphones. Oh my God.
Yeah. So that's that self-presence where it's like, it's not happening to you per se, it's happening to the character, but you're embodying the avatar.
Yeah. It feels like you are channeling. Yeah, exactly. Like you just said, embodying the avatar.
Yeah. And then we have social presence, which involves the feeling that other social actors in the virtual environment, other NPCs, players are authentic, which they closely simulate real-world social actors. So yeah, the social links, right? Some of these party members, people get attached to them and they'll fucking fight you for them. Like real life. And I'm like, all right, man. I don't know about that, but
right.
People get like very, very close to these characters. And,
yeah. And they start shipping them and imagining themselves with them, their waifus and husbandos. Hell yeah.
Yeah, that is not this pod, but
no.
Let's go into physical presence, which refers to the degree to which the user feels that he or she can interact with objects in the virtual environment as he or she, they were actual physical objects, right? So video game research suggests that the experience of presence tends to predict enjoyment, behavior, and attitude change in both narrative and non-narrative games. The researcher demonstrates experiences of transportability and presence are associated with the identification of player characters in a narrative video game through surveys. They found that presence is connected with the experiences of identification within a narrative video game environment. However, only really self-presence appeared to be linked with identification in this particular study. And self-presence is associated with the feelings of embodying the avatar. So, like I mentioned earlier, right, the avatar's limbs or whatever.
Yeah.
So this is like a defining force in why we're going to finish this game, right? It's not everyone's going to finish Persona 3, Metaphor, whatever, right? But that self-presence is very important because if you can embody a part of that avatar, of that character, right, you're most likely going to see the end of that game.
You want to
you have some stakes in there, right? Even though they're virtual.
True. And
that's something doesn't have to be stuck to the silent protagonist. I'm sure like even, the other characters like Nathan Drake, right? More like, characters that have personalities.
Right.
You're going to see the end to it, but there's something about being able to embody that character, that silent protagonist, make those choices that I feel and I believe that just appeals. Of course, I don't want to play every game as a silent protagonist.
Right.
But I guess this is just me saying like, man, just if you hate that trope, give it a shot. I mean, or just like step away from it and give it some time because I think it's important. I don't think this is something we should get rid of. It's just like the Pokemon RPG system, right? It hasn't changed.
Yeah.
Right? It's classic. Turn-based RPGs, people say are too slow. They're classic, right? Don't change that stuff. We can change it up with new games like Metaphor, right?
Yeah,
which exactly. We keep talking about. Man, I just want to talk about Metaphor.
It's one of the most perfect JRPGs I've ever played, and it is an amazing game.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, I love the silent protagonist, and I really do enjoy these games. Some ending thoughts I have. So Persona 3 in particular, Makoto Yuki, again, is the silent protagonist that comes to mind when researching this episode. Makoto has his own personality, sure, but it is up to us as a player who are able to impact others in the game and thus the world. Again, I already talked about the Persona 3 ending, but he sacrifices himself as he's found the answer to life, which is fighting for others to protect. Think about it. We have a character who's aloof, doesn't really care about the world. How did he even get to this point where he wants to fight for others?
Right.
And that's the progression you see throughout the game. You as embodying this silent protagonist get to see that. So slowly we see Makoto open up to his friends and understand how important bonds are. So shout out to the Persona 3 movies as they showcase how Makoto transforms from a silent, uninterested protagonist to someone who enjoys life, friends, and the world. Because you can see it's way more apparent in the movies because they're under a time constraint, right? It's like an hour and a half for each movie. So you see him build up to what he's going to do at the end of the game.
Sorry, real quick. Is he silent in the movie?
Yeah, he doesn't say much.
Okay.
Like he'll say yeah, or he'll react and stuff.
That's really interesting, and I feel like it puts a lot of pressure on the director of the film in order to get a lot of expression or personality.
A lot of the supporting cast and the other characters that do carry those movies.
Okay.
Right? But are the actions of Makoto, who he's fighting to protect his friends, right? I think that's the message there. It's that's what we're trying to see. Because they all have a common goal of defeating the Dark Hour. But a lot of the voice acting and that kind of stuff, direction goes to the supporting cast for sure. So So we as the player guide Makoto and become invested in the world. His story becomes our story in the time we spend playing the game. The first time playing Persona 3 and not knowing what to expect defines presence in video games, as I mentioned earlier, right? That's self-presence. There's an identification that occurs with longer games such as Persona 3. We become part of that world.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're booting that game up every weekend, you know, every other day or whatever. Maybe it's every day. I don't know.
Yeah.
For those amount of hours, you are in that world. And these games are certainly not for everyone. Like I say, you know, I see the discourse online about being tired about the silent protagonist trope. But I believe the silent protagonist serves a purpose that we as people may be able to connect to a digital world and learn from those experiences. These games ooze psychological aspects, and delving into the world can be reflective of how we as individuals can impact the world around us. We can see the change that the character has in game. So what change can we have on the real world here? Right? Taking that as, you know, knowledge and whatever you learn from these games. So to those who have never given these games a shot, it's a huge time investment. I get it. But there's something wonderful and potentially transformative with these games. Again, check out the P3 movies if playing a 90+ hour RPG is impossible. Despite the movie's brevity, it skips a lot and the pacing's not so great. There's still something to learn and reflect on with these movies as well.
Yeah, I could see that. I think with the silent protagonist, there's a lot of time of reflection, especially when you're spending so much in-game time like with them, and you see their transformation, you see their story and how it plays out, and you feel like you go through that whole journey with them and you kind of reflect on it. And then I feel, at least me, after I'm done with a lot of these like big JRPGs, I don't know. I do. This might be cheesy. I feel like I do start reflecting on like my own relationships and interactions and certain things. I don't know. Maybe it's like I try to be that protagonist and like try to be a better person, try to like do something to not save the world, but, you know, have some sort of help someone out in whatever way I can in my world. And I feel like I don't really get that in other genres. Yeah. It's mostly RPGs or very story focused games, or maybe an action adventure RPG type thing, like a God of War or something, or Nathan Drake's like Uncharted. But I think JRPGs in general, because they're probably so long and pretty story packed, there's a lot of time to just live in that world, be in that world. And then once they're over, you have to like separate yourself from it. And now you're almost like applying some of the stuff you just learned into your own world. And
right.
Yeah.
It's definitely nice. With the games like these, there's like a mourning period after, right? And I think with any like media as well, like you get so attached to it and it's like, it's over. What do I do now? Right? I'm sure like when you finish an anime, a TV show, and like, well, what the hell do I do now?
Yeah, especially one that really impacts you and that you're hooked on. Yeah.
And with these games, they impact you in a certain way. P3, P4, and P5 have all impacted me in a certain way, different from each other. Right. P3 is more like, yeah, dude, like you're not here forever. Take those chances, you know?
Yeah.
P4 is more like enjoy the bonds you have because it's not temporary, but you don't know when those bonds will end, right? When you have to go back to real life, right? And P5, you know, the protagonist is imprisoned essentially. Right. Enjoy that freedom, right? Enjoy.
I forgot about that.
Yeah.
He's running away from the cops at the end of them. Oh,
yeah, he is. Yeah.
Okay, I guess I'll put spoilers for P5, but yeah.
So enjoy those bonds, right? Like, live life to the fullest.
I know. What's our like relationship level right now out of 6?
Out of 6? We're at a 2.5.
Damn it. I'm gonna have to put in. I don't know.
Gotta pump up my stats real quick.
How do I min-max our relationship?
Gotta go get some food after, right?
Spend some time with Joe, unlock some XP.
But yeah, these games are awesome. And so now we'll move into the DLC, Persona 3 episode Aigis. And honestly, this is just the time for me to gush. The DLC. I did include some internal family systems. I know we're an educational pod at times, right? But I really want to talk about the DLC with you.
Yeah.
And with the audience as well.
Yes, please.
You know, so I always say this at the end of my session. Any questions, any concerns before we move on to the next one?
I love when Therapist Joe comes out. I think you should just dive right into it.
Gotcha. Okay. So episode Aigis. And we'll talk a little bit about internal family systems, which is the core self. Our core self has different parts within ourselves, not like multiple personalities, just different parts. This is the angry part, the happy part, you know, maybe the vengeful part, that kind of stuff. So let's get into Aigis's story. So Aigis appears as an android with short blonde hair and light blue eyes. She aids the protagonist in the main game during the halfway point in the game. However, as you can probably guess, the DLC focuses on her. When the DLC opens up, Aigis shares that with the group that she would like to return to the lab where she was created. She no longer wants to live the life of a student. As the DLC progresses, we learn that this is due to the protagonist dying. Her prime directive, she had to protect him.
Oh, damn. And then because he died and he sacrificed himself, she felt like she
lost her purpose. Yeah. And I don't want to get too deep on this pod, right? But have you ever had that happen where you lose a purpose or you lose a goal or a directive?
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a period of grief, mourning.
Definitely. I mean, maybe sometimes a death like in the family or something, or like, I think the biggest one for me this year was like the loss of a job, unexpected loss of a job. Like that, a lot of purpose was surrounding working in a career, and then to no longer have that definitely feels like, okay, well, what's my directive now?
Yeah, like, what am I going to do now? Right.
Totally.
And it impacts you from day to day, right? Some days you can deal with it. You're you're doing other things. Some days it hits you.
Yeah.
Right. So this is where, the character's like, what's the point? Right. She was going to school. She was hanging out with the group as well, the friends in Persona 3.
Why does the android need to go to school?
She wants, the idea is that she has to be more human. Because at first she's very robotic, and then over time she becomes more like human, like her emotions. She's able to cry as well at the end of it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so she's becoming more human. There's a backstory to why her prime directive was to protect Makoto. I don't know if we can get into it. I think I could just sum it up. Essentially, when Makoto was 10, he was in a car accident around Tsumi Port Island or something like that.
Okay.
Or in Japan or somewhere. And the dark hour is still a thing. It was always a thing. So Aigis was created when Makoto was like 10 years old. She was the one fighting the shadows at the time.
Oh.
And so Makoto's parents were killed in a car accident. It was the shadows, actually. And so she kind of like imprinted on him.
Interesting.
Like, oh, I need to protect this kid. I need to protect this boy. Because he was like 10 years old at the time, right? And she was fighting a shadow.
In that same area? Mm-hmm. Sorry. Mm-hmm. Oh, okay.
It's in the cutscene. So that's explained. And so when Makoto's older, when we actually control him in the game, we meet Aigis. And Aigis is very clingy. She's like, I need to protect you, right? I need to take care of you. That kind of stuff. It's because she like imprinted on him, like because he was alone. He didn't know what was going on. She was fighting a shadow. I think she lost that battle. She might have won it. I don't remember. But there's the backstory to Makoto on how like he's used to death. He lost his parents, right? He was in a car accident. So this kind of stuff doesn't faze him anymore. Because as a 10-year-old, he dealt with it.
Yeah.
And he's still dealing with it throughout the game. But that's kind of why it's her prime directive.
Okay.
So the DLC has Aigis and the rest of the team traverse the Abyss of Time, which is like the dorm where you live in. There's like a dungeon beneath, right? And it's like this sand desert type thing where multiple doors pop up. So each door you take is about maybe 15 to 25 floors. And there's a boss at the end and like mid bosses and stuff, right?
Okay.
Each time you beat a dungeon, you get a flashback on how the persona supporting role, the other characters, how they awaken to their persona, what their reasons were to awaken.
Oh.
Yeah. So that's the kind of stuff you'll see in there.
So it really builds on the backstory of the other characters and the other party members.
Yes.
Okay.
And it's not a lot. It's like there's not much story to it because you're just dungeon crawling. You get these bits and pieces at the end. But why you're like going through the Abyss of Time is because you see the protagonist. You see a shadow of him. And the team is like, what is that? Who is that? Right? And you know who it is.
Yeah. What do you mean who it is?
But they can't tell. So you're following through these dungeons, these other doors in the Abyss of Time. And they're actually stuck in the dorm. They're stuck on March 31st, 2010. So the day does not proceed. So
is that the day he died?
No, that's like 2 months after I think he died.
Oh, okay.
So this is very fresh for a lot of characters, that his death. There's one character, Yukari, who when she joins up with the team, she's very like, can we just get this over with? I don't want to be here. Right? I don't want to deal with this because she's still dealing with the grief. I don't know if she's like the canonical love interest of Persona 3 because, all that stuff is like, it's up to you, the player, right? We're in a romance and stuff. But she takes it very like personal and very like she's still dealing with it. And you see that because at the end of the DLC, she's like, I'm so sorry for being, an asshole to everyone. I was just dealing with the grief. I thought I was alone, but I can see that you guys as well are dealing with the grief. I feel like a fool that I didn't say anything or like open up to you guys, right?
Yeah.
And so there's like a lot of these changes within the characters, which this DLC is really cool for that kind of stuff. Like I said, I think I mentioned in Scatterbrain, like if you love the P3 cast, go for the DLC. If you don't really care much, I would say just watch it on YouTube, right? Don't spend the money and just, if you're even interested, watch it on YouTube.
I can't imagine someone getting through P3R and not wanting the DLC though.
Yeah, right.
To be honest.
Yeah. So, it is what it is. In the DLC, we are introduced to a character named by the name of Metis, who we learn is Aigis' sister as the DLC progresses. Metis appears to be a humanoid android, a model of they're called anti-shadow suppression weapons, similar to Aigis.
Cool.
Attached to her head is a golden helmet-like headpiece with a red butterfly visor, and she wears like a metallic skirt, which continues with the red butterfly motif. Her design is really cool. I like it. Metis has a strong attachment to Aigis and vocalizes how her directive is to protect Aigis. Does this sound familiar? Sounds like, Aigis and Makoto, right? At the end of the DLC, after we defeat society's desire for death, that's the final boss, we learned that Metis is an internal system. This is where the internal family systems part comes in. She's a part of Aigis, kind of like the self, the unconscious self, right? This is the part that was externalized by Aigis. So Metis is that part. This is her loneliness. Metis is the loneliness and sadness that belongs to Aigis. So this explains a lot of Metis' behavior in the DLC, that she wants to protect Aigis. She wants to be with her at all times, right? This is the part that she externalized, right? And it was like, I don't want anything to do with you. Aigis didn't want to deal with the sadness anymore, with the grief, right? So this externalization was given life as Metis. And so that's why she's like clingy, kind of sort of needy, acts like a kid at times, because it's that part of Aigis that she's tired of. She doesn't want to deal with it. This is the part that she shed because she no longer needed it, because she felt it was a nuisance as she continues to mourn for the protagonist. So this is where we get that, that family systems. Like that part, I don't need it, right? Shut it down, right? It was given life. It came back. And eventually Aigis does accept that part. And like, yeah, I need these parts to make me human, to make me whole, right? Because there are the idea with eternal family systems is that even though, let's say you have an angry part, right? Anger is usually seen as a negative thing, right? A negative emotion, but it can still serve you. That anger can serve you in a way of like, maybe it turns into motivation, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the idea is like, yes, I can see why the sadness and the grief doesn't feel great. It doesn't, and it never does, right? But it becomes a part of you where you can learn and say, how can I use this to serve me as a person? And so this is the idea that I believe you see at the end of the DLC. So again, she accepts her own part. She recognizes that protagonist found his answer to life, and so she has as well. So just as Makoto Yuki protected the people he loved and formed bonds with, Aigis is now determined to make connections with others and reduce society's desire for death, right? So the idea is that the final boss of the DLC is always going to come back because there's a part of society that yearns for death. Sometimes I'm sure some days we don't want to go to work. We don't want to get up. We just want to be not dead, but just like die, right? Just kind of like don't deal with anything.
Yeah.
That apathy. Right? Yeah. I think that's a better word for it,
Yeah, rather than desire for death. Yeah, maybe apathy.
But at the end, she desires to live and return to school. She doesn't want to go back to the lab. She enjoys the connection she formed because it's what Makoto would want her to do, right? And she has a new directive, is to make these bonds and to help people, right? And reduce that desire for death. And it's what Makoto would have wanted for her as well.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the end of the DLC.
Wow. Even though I've heard you talk about this game and the DLC like for a while now, it surprises me just to hear everything that it touches on, especially with you discussing it for the past hour or so. It sounds like very deep and heavy and just like not a light game to play, and almost like you have to face some stuff yourself, like a mini therapy session between you and the game as you're playing it and dealing with a lot of the narrative stuff. And I think that's really cool for a game to touch on a lot of these aspects, since, some games, not every game needs to have this. It's not every game I want to play.
Astrobot is not to be dark and gloomy. No, exactly. It doesn't need to be.
Get death out of my Astrobot. But it's nice to go there every once in a while and kind of have a bit more heavier topic and, I don't know, just analyze certain aspects of your life while playing the game, which, once again, I know not everyone is seeking for when they play games. A lot of people turn to it for escapism. But I do too, but I also like having something to ponder and something to think about and analyze whenever I'm playing a game. And this game sounds like it's right up my alley, and I probably would have played it if I wasn't knee deep in metaphor right now.
Yeah, dude, this year's just been like bangers behind bangers and just back to back. And it's just like, we even had a lull, I think, in like April, March. Or something like that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think Dragon's Dogma 2 came out in March.
Yeah.
So wait, you didn't play it till later.
I didn't play it till like a couple months later.
I got it then, and I was like, okay.
Yeah.
It wasn't as satisfying, but yeah.
No, coming from like Infinite Wealth and stuff into like Dogma 2, I'm like, yeah, you're not gonna have a good time unless you're into that jank Dragon's Dogma, which I am. But even I got frustrated with it at times. Like I was telling you, like hoofing it to the end boss, thinking I put a crystal down and thinking I beat the game in a way of like, I'm going to teleport here and just walk to the final boss. No, dude, you got to walk those whole fucking 30 minutes. Thing. I was like, okay, here we go.
It'll be a fun game of the year discussion at the
Oh yeah, I can't wait for that. Yeah. And there's so many other games. I still have Silent Hill 2, Metaphor.
Yeah.
You know, and I think some other Dragon Quest is coming out. That Mario Bros game,
Super
RPG.
Mario. Yeah, was it Super? No, it wasn't Superstar Saga. That's an old one.
That's the first one.
What is it? Brothership?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That one looks fun.
Yeah, but
nice.
Going back to this, I just want to end like even the music for this game. There are like the song and the lyrics, like they represent. There's like a line that says "Burn your dread," right? Because what their protagonist is doing is each time they summon a persona, they're facing their fear of death, right? They're overcoming that fear of death. That's the only way you can summon a persona in Persona 3 is you're facing death, right? So you need to. It's cheesy, right? Burn that dread, right? Because you got to fight to live, right? Whatever that means to you.
Wow.
You know? So even the music is representative of that.
Damn. Yeah, they really tied it in. I know Atlas does a great job at that as well, writing some stuff and composing some things that really embody wherever you're at. I just think of that cafe music from Persona 5 Reload as well. It was like very cozy. Well, thank you for talking about this and like going through this journey. It feels like we just went through a whole session on grief and
this
loss
felt like a therapy session as well too. Kind of low key, you know.
I think we deserved a break and a decompression after this. So, what do you say we end it here? You're okay with that?
I think I'm good. I can keep talking about it, but I know
you and me both.
I know we got to talk about Metaphor outside of this pod.
Yeah. I'm sure next week, this episode we're recording right now is probably going to come out Friday, October. What is this Friday? I don't even know.
18th, I believe, right?
18th? Yeah. Okay. So then, next week's episode, we'll probably return to Scatterbrained. And I think my episode on Metaphor will probably come out late because I got some scheduling stuff too coming. But, thank you all for listening. Really appreciate it. I know this was a heavier topic, but I hope you enjoyed it. I really hope you enjoyed Persona, if any of the games in the series. And if you're playing Metaphor, please let us know because we definitely want to chat about it. Be sure to rate and review our podcast on whatever listening app you're using. That really helps us out. So, and if you're not already following us on Instagram, YouTube, and Twitch, just search up Mind Controllers Pod, I believe, on all of those, and you should find us. And if you have the financial means to do so and want to help us out a bit, subscribe to our Patreon for a little $2 a month. Buy me and Joe a little upgrade on our fry size at McDonald's.
1/67th of a Metaphor.
Yeah, of a Metaphor. I always turn to food for this. But anyways, thank you guys again. And please take care of yourselves. And we will see you next week with Scatterbrained.
Yeah, see you in the next one.
All right, bye everybody.